This is the fourth and final part of Arizona Indigenous history. We had discussed the struggle for control of mineral rights in Navajo and Hopi lands, coinciding with a national push for more Indigenous rights in the USA. In 1968, the American Indian Movement, AIM, was founded in Minneapolis to advance Native American civil rights. The Indian Civil Rights Act of 1968 passed the same year, recognizing tribes as sovereign nations with the federal government. 4 years later, in 1972 in Phoenix, the Salt River floods several times and kills 8 people. In 1973, construction on the Central Arizona Project begins. In 1974, the Navajo-Hopi Land Settlement Act up north is generated. Literally, some dude in Washington drew an arbitrary line on a map to parcel off the jointly owned Navajo-Hopi lands and separate the tribes. He had never been there, didn't know anything about the land, but the stroke of his pen caused the sudden forced relocation of 1,000 Hopis and 10,000 Navajos who happened to be on the wrong side of his line. Due to the land allotment system that had been put in place, these people couldn't resettle on their tribal lands. Instead, they were forced to go to border towns, many leaving a traditional way of life to suddenly a Western one, where they had to make physical money, pay bills, purchase food in stores, and live in an English-speaking world. A devastating reality for elders who knew no English at all, had always raised their own food, and had never heard of paying rent before. Broken Rainbow, the documentary which you can find on YouTube, also talks about this in depth. The following year, in 1975, the Papago Freeway is passed by Phoenix voters. The Indian Self-Determination Education Assistance Act of 1975 also passes, giving more control to tribes over federally subsidized programs for Indians. That's important because it means tribes could have more say in how their programs run, allowing more cultural competency in healthcare, education, and other programs the federal government runs as part of its treaty obligations for land exchanges of the past. Things are looking a little brighter with that act until, in 1976, the federal government admits it's been secretly forcing sterilization of Indian women. The Indian Health Service, or IHS, part of the federal Indian program, sterilized 3,406 American Indian women without their permission or even knowledge between 1973 and 1976. 36 were under the age of 21, despite a court-ordered moratorium on sterilizations of women younger than 21. Why? A similar thing happened at this time with other populations of color. It's a mixture of racist beliefs about irresponsible breeding, leading to large families, and also, arguably, a move to further reduce the Indian problem. In 1978, Congress passes the Indian Child Welfare Act, or ICWA, granting tribal government jurisdiction over child custody and adoption on the reservation. Also passed this year is the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act and the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. Previously, Indian religions still remained outlawed. This act provided protection for the use of eagle feathers in ceremonies and other uses. In 1980, the Salt River floods again, washing away most Phoenix bridges that span it. In 1985, the first water from CAP reaches Maricopa County. The Tucson Historic Preservation Foundation is established in the same year. In 1990, Phoenix reaches its hottest recorded temperature thus far at 122 degrees Fahrenheit. The Native American Graves and Repatriation Act passes so that it becomes a government responsibility to return culturally affiliated, federal recognized tribes' human remains, funerary objects, sacred objects, and objects of cultural patrimony that have been found on public lands during activities that use federal funds or that have been curated in facilities that receive federal funding, like certain museums. It's a start to reverse the exploitation of Native cultures. In 1993, the Salt River floods and destroys the new Mill Avenue Bridge in Phoenix. That same year, construction of the CAP is completed. In 1994, Lake Havasu City in the west of Arizona records its hottest temperature of the state at 128 degrees Fahrenheit. 15 years later, the Tempe Town Lake Dam bursts. You begin to see how much nature dominates over even the most sophisticated of human feats. In 2011, a major sandstorm hits Phoenix, and the following year, in 2012, we return to the snowball ski resort we mentioned from the 1930s. Now it is under fire by tribes who consider the mountain sacred because the resort is deciding to use wastewater to create snow. Despite the opposition, tribal religious beliefs were not upheld, and the resort operates its snowblowers to this day. In 2014, the Navajo Nation, however, did win the largest lawsuit by a tribe against the U.S. government, $554 million for the mismanagement of decades of mineral leases and funds. But how much are the reparations for the previous and subsequent genocide truly worth? In December of 2014, Barack Obama authorized the 2015 National Defense Authorization Act, transferring lands sacred to the Apache in Arizona to Resolution Copper Mine. This joint venture is owned by Rio Tinto and BHP Billiton. The land swap granted the Copper Company 2,422 acres of national forest land in exchange for deeding the federal government 5,344 acres of its private holdings. The dispute became known as Oak Flat. In 2017, ADOT begins construction on the controversial South Mountain Freeway in Phoenix despite tribal opposition. The project will result in many issues for tribal communities, including the destruction of a sacred mountain. It has since opened. And ongoing now for many years is the dispute along the southern border, where the wall being pushed forward by Trump threatens to cut off relatives from one another, most notably the Yaqui and the O'odham. In fact, 62 miles are on the border of Mexico and the Donna O'odham Nation, yet the U.S. assumes control of it, leading to surveillance and unwanted problems for the tribal members. This series, of course, does not capture everything in Arizona. It is merely an overview highlighting various points. From time to time, we hope to do similar videos for every state. So far, we have done Louisiana and Hawaii. Thank you for watching, and please stick around for future videos. As always, be sure to subscribe, provide feedback or requests, and share this channel so we can all be on the same page.